Hello and welcome to the Bitcoin Standard podcast. Our guest today is Mick, the CEO and co-founder of Geyser Fund. It's a Bitcoin native crowdfunding platform that enables people around the world to turn their ideas into reality through community funding. I've been paying attention to Geyser recently. I found it very interesting, and I thought it would be nice to get Mick, who's MetaMick14 on Twitter, at MetaMick14. Would be interesting to get him and to learn about his experience becoming a Bitcoiner and setting up Geyser and how this has been going so far. So, Mick, thanks for coming, man.
Saif, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks.
All right, so let's begin first with your origin story. How did you fall down this particular rabbit hole of the internet?
Wow, that's a fascinating question. And I think in some ways it'd probably be very boring. It's a very usual story. But at the same time, it definitely goes through my own kind of personal life trajectory. But I've been, the short answer is I read the Bitcoin Standard and I was orange pilled. And the long answer, or just like the mid answer, would probably be that I've been, just exposed to the power of technology. My passion has always actually been humans, and I studied anthropology and economics, and having studied anthropology and economics was quite brought to very discordant views together. So I had to kind of grapple with either someone's wrong here, or maybe they're both wrong, but it's okay. People have different realities. So I was actually thankfully exposed to academic just the way that academics don't really make sense in many different ways, and kind of realizing that not what I studied is not truth, right? And actually there's truth is complex to get to. And so that really, I think, helped me. And then I ended up working for nonprofits, curious about just really supporting underprivileged. I come from that sort of humanitarian background, and I ended up in Nepal after the earthquake, living there and seeing communities just on the ground, and seeing how they lived, how they thrived, and how they did not thrive. And in many cases, there was just extreme poverty, and people living in debts, in debt bondage, with having their entire life in debt bondage, with interest rate on their loans being more than 200%, just crazy things, right? And then I realized, at the same time, while I'm a Western man coming in to try to support them, just seeing how amazing technology made their lives. Just their simple smartphone, what allowed them to connect with their families and friends all around the world, right? So they were in Saudi Arabia, and they were in India and so forth, and they were sending remittances back home, and it was all done through the smartphone. All the while they had very, very simple houses. They had no sanitation, and they knew what worked for them, and they knew that technology was essentially democratizing wealth and this ability to communicate across borders. So that really blew my mind, especially the time in which, around 5 to 10 years ago, there's been this narrative around, look, the technology is a black mirror, and everything is, technology is making our life worse. And a lot of anthropologists are saying, yeah, we should go back to the romantic Rousseauian past, and technology is actually, making our life more difficult, and there's all these mental health problems. And although there is a lot of truth to that, there is a lot of problems that new technologies are creating. This realization that technology is this inflationary force that just elevates humanity really, really kind of broke a lot of this kind of matrix from the veil off, really. And then I discovered Bitcoin, and then I discovered how, oh my God, Bitcoin is the money, the technology of money, and I sort of went on the rabbit hole. I dabbled into cryptos, into many people have, and then in 2018, I that's when I read the Bitcoin Standard, and just a lot of things just clicked into place. So I have to thank you for bringing it all together for me in that wonderful book. And then after that, I was like, you know what? I want to contribute more towards Bitcoin. I don't know if just hodling is going to be enough for me. I want to be a part of this. I want to give something because I've been blessed with so much, with this gift of Bitcoin. So I want to contribute, and that's where we start into the idea of Geyser and how that came about. But maybe I'll keep it to this for now.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I think I would say there's it's not a very big demographic in Bitcoiners, but there's quite a bit of people who come into Bitcoin from the humanitarian angle. I think it's more common to see people that come from the software development, people who are familiar with cryptography, people who are familiar with the technical aspects. I think these are the populations that bring in the most Bitcoiners.
Yeah.
I'd say libertarian is probably second. This is something that brings in also a large number of people, but there's also a small contingent of people who come in from charity work. And can you tell us more about how you see this? Why you think Bitcoin is a natural progression from this, and how maybe it fixes some of the problems that you see in the world of charity and NGOs and in general, the do-gooder industry.
Yeah, and actually, I worked in that space, and then actually moved on from it feeling completely disillusioned and being actually kind of kicked out. I was kind of actually bullied into the fact that in this entire industry, there's this narrative that if you're a man, you're bad. If you're white, you're bad. And I'm sure that's not the case for many people, but it was my experience. And so I unfortunately, actually felt quite repelled from it for a while. And so I ended up working in software and user experience design, and worked in banking after that. But the philosophical angle is definitely that, this fact that the technology is what elevates humanity at the end of the day. It's as much as we like to think that you're going out there and you're saving people, no, the reality is it's technology that is doing that. It's doing most of the work. 90% of the lifting is done by the fact that now you have plumbing, that now you have electric grids, and that you have the ability to communicate at no cost across the entire world. You don't have to wait 2 weeks to send a letter. Technology is what does that. So from philosophical perspective, for me, it was okay. Well, Bitcoin is that for money, and so it's actually a good thing. It's not just a number go up, but it's actually a good thing for the world. So that's sort of how it really clicked for me. And then as we started building Geyser, and then we started seeing a lot more projects that had to do with just connecting humanity together through money, I started realizing just how powerful this could be as a humanitarian technology, as a technology for connecting the world together. And in particular, if you think about how the UN or nonprofits work, in which in many cases they take the majority of the funds that people are donating, and here we're dealing with a peer-to-peer technology that can connect to people across the world seamlessly, and that is incredibly powerful if you think about it, and especially considering the fact that GoFundMe, Kickstarter, and so forth, these the usual traditional fundraising platform only work pretty much in the West, and that's because they rely on these third-party providers like Stripe and PayPal that have all sorts of limitations. And so Bitcoin as peer-to-peer money can literally connect humanity together, and that is incredibly powerful. And so Geyser, as a non-custodial platform, can connect these peer-to-peers and bring them closer together and surface them. But ultimately, all we're doing is listing projects and so it makes it possible for people to make this just a lot more, just a better user experience. So yeah, I think that's really quite powerful. But ultimately, I think what's important for us at Geyser is that what was the impetus of Geyser? The impetus of Geyser was making Bitcoin adoption happen, making Bitcoin like a reality. We were scrolling through Twitter and we were seeing all these great ideas. There were people saying, "Oh my God, I want to I want to launch a co-working space in my city. I want to do a meetup. I have this idea for a Bitcoin book. I have a video game idea for that integrates Bitcoin. How about we send, these, we crowdfund these books and give them to people and to orange pill them about Bitcoin. So I've noticed all these like ideas, great ideas that can help advance Bitcoin. And I was seeing at the same time people scanning their QR codes on Twitter and saying, send me the money using this like ancient technology of just having screenshotting a QR code into their Twitter post. So I was like, there's got to be a better way here. There's got to be a better solution, and so that's where the idea of Geyser as a crowdfunding platform came about, where you could tell your story, right? Tell your idea, update on the progress of the idea, and showcase just the power of community coming together to make that idea happen. And ultimately, the underlying thread that connects all the projects on Geyser is just showing, look what Bitcoin can do. Look, if we come together as Bitcoiners, how much power we can have to change the world and to make these great ideas happen. And it's ultimately that. It's not, let's not sit around. Let's be active and make Bitcoin a reality through great ideas and through people that are funding these great ideas. So that's really kind of like the key impetus that got us into, building Geyser. And the humanitarian trend is also a really important bit. I think that's really Bitcoin. Like that beyond Geyser, Bitcoin is a human technology that just elevates humanity and does not discriminate. And I think that's also incredibly beautiful.
Yeah, I think I agree with you a lot on the idea that it is technology that brings about progress. I think a huge part of the problems that we see in the world come from the fact that all kinds of pretenders pretend to have given us the things that technology has given us. So I think the engine, running hot water, internal plumbing, wastewater treatment, I think these few technologies are responsible for the vast majority of improvement we see in human health and life expectancy. And
Totally.
they're really, really powerful technologies that have, and electricity, of course, as well. And wherever they go in the world, you witness the same thing. Quality of life improves. I think the problem is it's a problem on the one hand, and it's a blessing. So you can look at it in a bad way, you can look at it in a good way. It's bad because people have been psyoped into thinking that all kinds of other things are what gave us that. So the most common and most obvious and most important and most dangerous one, of course, is the belief that it is the state. It's actually that some people are taking money from others and giving it to others that happen to be their friends. That's why our lives have improved, and we should just have more taxation, more government power and control. And this is an unfortunate reality because, as society became richer, government became more powerful, and then they take the credit for it.
Mm-hmm.
And another, of course, major one is fiat, and of course a highly related one is, since we've invented printing money, then all of these magics of industrialization managed to materialize. But that's not true. The magics of industrialization came about in the 19th century under the gold standard, and it took time for them to spread. But it wasn't inflation that gave us industrialization. I think it's the exact opposite. We would have had more industrialization if we hadn't been going through inflation, which is effectively deindustrialization and decivilization. It's the destruction of capital by policy. I think democracy is another one people think of. I think they think that magically you start choosing between psychopaths in a box, and then you magically start getting a better life expectancy. But I really think it's technology that does those things, and it's depressing because people put too much hope and faith in these pretenders. But I think it's also liberating because you realize ultimately, as long as we keep finding new technologies, we're going to route around all of that stuff, and we're going to find a way, because improvements in technology continue to give people an edge and continue to give people more of an angle. And I think Geyser is a good example of that. You allow people from all over the world to access financing because they have Bitcoin, which people who don't have Bitcoin can't access. And it's so much easier to get on Geyser and set up a Bitcoin wallet anywhere in the world than it is to get on a KYC platform for a very large number of people in the world.
Yeah, and we're able to do that because Geyser is non-custodial, so we don't store any funds. The funds go again peer to peer in a way that we don't control, we don't administer, we don't manage any funds at all. So all we're doing is listing the projects, and that's really the magic of Bitcoin. We connect directly to the protocol to do that and make that happen. But yeah, I totally agree. State fiat democracy. Could even add in their medicine. I think you probably agree with that.
I was gonna say, I had that one listed down among the funds that I said, yeah, I think modern medicine is also taking credit for a lot of that.
It is definitely. When I think most of the challenges that we see and like a lot of the credit of like the standards of living and all these things, but a lot of it is just plumbing and sanitation and economic development. There's a great book about that I've been actually just reading. That's why I brought it up, called Dissolving Illusions. Really, really good one about just like that reality and just challenges like the last 200 years of medicine.
Yes, yeah, I've heard about that book. I think it's I'm trying to remember the name of the author.
I actually don't recall. Humphreys. I think Humphreys is one of them.
I think Susan Humphreys, yes.
And then I forget the other one. But yeah, that's I think a recent rabbit hole that Bitcoiners should probably look more into. But I'd recommend people just to look at that and just kind of change their perspective, especially like the myths around certain medical practices we have today. But I'm no expert either, so I'm just learning now.
Yes, yeah, it's a very interesting book. I've heard about it. Her name is Susan Humphreys. Yeah, I think it's another great example. I think because modern medicine switched to its kind of modern methodology around the same time that industrialization began to spread. And I think a lot of the benefits from industrialization and sanitation got attributed to the modern medicine, and I think that has colored people's perceptions. And I think as people start, the last few years have given us a very vivid,
a few glimpses, a glimpse into under the curtain, definitely,
of how these kind of things work. I mean, it was the last few years were a ramping up of a process that has been going on for a significant amount of time. And I think in the same way that with inflation, a lot of people started to notice the inflation starting in 2020. I think a lot of people started to notice the medical mafia around 2020 as well. I think you could find a lot of commonalities in the two systems.
And kudos to you, man, because you called it. You called bullshit. You called bullshit big time, and respect to that. I was still, I don't want to say a normie, but I was still like, no, it cannot be. That'll be too dark. That cannot be true. But no, man, they're it's pretty dark out there. It's and I think like you've mentioned many times, I think it's like when you have a system of fiat democracy where if you get the consent of the people to print a ton of money to dedicate to a certain resource, whether it's war, whether it's medical intervention, a pandemic, whether it's I don't know, like a new, I don't know, a sort of like cataclysmic, terrorist attack or whatever. If you can legitimize it to the people, then it's fine to print $1 trillion and give $8 billion to the vaccine manufacturers, right, to create a new vaccine, like and have no liability. Like, so I think that's where it really what it can boil down to, and that's the power of like fiat democracy, right? Where if you get the consent of the people, the demos, then then really what you need to do is you need to have a very, very powerful system of propaganda. That's really all you need. It's I mean, it works. It still works. Hopefully, with every new crisis, we get a percentage of people that start to see what is really happening. Right? It started in 2001. I think really, really powerfully. Probably much, much before and world wars as well. But in 2001, that was a big one. And then you have, that was really the military industrial complex, and you have the pharmaceutical industrial complex in 2000 and was it 2020, 21. And so if you're able to kind of influence behavior and influence perception, then you can do whatever you want, really. And yeah.
Principles of Economics, my complete guide to understanding economics, is now available in hardcover, audiobook, and ebook from Saifedean.com, Amazon, and many more booksellers worldwide. And now I am also teaching a course based on this book on my website, Saifedean.com. Principles of Economics will run the whole academic year, from September to June, and will have a new lecture every 2 weeks, as well as weekly live online discussion seminars open to learners from all over the world and from all walks of life. Whether you're a student, a professional, or a retiree, you are making economic decisions every day, and this course will arm you with the wisdom of centuries of economists to improve your economic decision-making. You'll also get a free book of Principles of Economics if you sign up for the course. Go to Saifedean.com and sign up now. Yeah, I mean, I think the way that I like to think of it is that ultimately, pretty much everybody except the most insane, rabid anarcho-capitalist like me, which is a very, very tiny minority, pretty much everybody agrees that when there's a crisis, when there's a big problem, then yes, you do want the government to step in. I mean, all of our statist programming is geared toward setting up this way of thinking about the problem of the state. You posit a hypothetical in which nothing works except the state intervenes, and then therefore you conclude that clearly, therefore, we need the state to intervene. And this is, of course, very pervasive, and the most common and most vivid and most effective way of getting this idea through is the idea that it's a crisis. If there's a crisis, then it's time for us to really do something, acting through the state. So everybody agrees that the state needs to act, and everybody agrees that the state needs to run the money printer at that time. So when there's a crisis, there is unanimous consent that we need to get the money printer running. So if you want to find out why you are constantly being told you're in a crisis, and why you're constantly told to worry about all kinds of crises happening all over the world, and people getting sick in China, oh no, crisis, run the money printer and hide everybody in their home for 3 years. Someone is sick in China. Every time there's a new problem anywhere, any two people fighting, then the US needs to intervene and needs to print a bunch of money and intervene in the crisis. All of that runs next to the money printer. So if you want to see, why is there such a concerted effort to psyop you into getting scared all the time? It's because there's a money printer that runs proportionate to your fear. The more scared you are, 100%. The more the money printer is going to run. So if you want to see who's psyoping you into being a hysterical statist, then look at who's running the money printer.
I think you said it so well. I think it goes back to fear, because fear is how we get manipulated and how we're pushed into a corner, into a certain direction. And I'll admit it, like I succumbed to fear at COVID. I was like, oh my God, look at these videos of Chinese people falling on the floor. And I was like, oh my God, this may be it. Like this maybe is like, the pandemic that we saw in the movie Contagion, and there's gonna be people selling us snake oil to monetize from the crisis. But yeah, totally. I think and thankfully I woke up, but I think we need this to serve as immunity, right? Like we need to learn our lessons eventually, and hopefully as these crises become more and more extreme and more obvious, more and more people will wake up. But also in the midst of this very cynical and kind of and realistic but dark discussion, to me, Geyser and Bitcoin is really how we get out of it, because Bitcoin is how we pull the plug from the fiat money, and how we go back to a peer-to-peer existence, and how, you mentioned state, fiat, medicine, democracy. We talked about human rights. We talked about, medicine, research. Like, if all these things are being corrupted by fiat, even humanitarianism, like through the state-driven humanitarian system, well, how we get back in track is through a peer-to-peer system, right? Where people donate to each other based on their lived realities on the ground, where we trust each other and we don't require a third-party nanny state to guide us into moving the funds in a particular way that ends up being actually quite wasteful. We make films that are not funded by the propaganda machines, and that win Pulitzer and Nobel Peace Prizes and all these certified, the Golden Globe Awards that speak of the made bullet points that will get them to become winners. We just rebuild the world, right? We rebuild the world on a new parallel structure of Bitcoin, where what matters are individuals taking actions and bringing hope to the world, and not being driven by fear. And I think if there's like a silver lining for me in all this is, or if there's like one aspect of hope, is just because we see so much is like darkness around us all the time. But if I look at Geyser, what is happening on Geyser, like honestly, like every day there's like tens of projects that are being launched about a new Bitcoin film, or like a film about the future and renewable energies, or like how to envision a new future. And that's why I'm a Bitcoiner. So that's why I'm so bullish on Bitcoiners, because I see in them a drive to go beyond fear and towards hope. Like, they see hope, they have hope, and they want to rebuild the world based on hope. The book you wrote, The Bitcoin Standard, like that was, changed millions of people's lives. It's because you were giving them hope of a new direction to go into. And it's true for so many others, like making films, doing education. I think you've had John from Mi Primer Bitcoin. Again, hundreds of thousands of people are being taught about Bitcoin schools in El Salvador, right? This is what I think. While the world is really going to shit, I'm really trying to focus so much into just let's keep building the future we want to see. And it's amazing to see how much is happening.
Yeah. I think also one very interesting application you guys did over the last year was that you allowed people in Gaza to raise money on your platform. And I think this made a huge difference, because in Gaza now, people are unable to get money in through any of the traditional channels. Nothing works. But Bitcoin works. There are still exchange shops. There are still people that are willing to take Bitcoin from you and sell it for physical cash, because it's the only way that they get money in and out of there. And so even as, it's been an entire year of mass murder and horrific death and destruction. I mean, the systematic destruction of all infrastructure, all power plants, water treatment plants, sewage plants, banks, buildings, all sewage, everything, every single thing that makes modern society possible has been being destroyed. And yet Bitcoin continues to work in there, and people are able to get Bitcoin in and out because it's Bitcoin. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, it's totally agree. It's been a total, well, first of all, a catastrophe that again highlights the importance of Bitcoin and how Bitcoin provides hope for these people. Ultimately, Bitcoin as a protocol. And at Geyser, we listed Youssef's project, and I think we had another project as well in Gaza. And we did that with a lot of care. Wanting to ensure that the funds were being used legitimately, and Yusuf did an incredible job. He also kind of verified himself, and he provided so much information of like the funds that are being distributed, so much video footage, images, and so forth. I think he was for some time the most funded project on Geyser, and we're incredibly proud of that. And we are thankful for the work he's done. It's actually started even before the whole war happened. He was running a project where he was supporting. He was actually just like using his Bitcoin to buy toys and the games and entertaining children in hospitals. So it was a very, very small, humble project. And as October 7th hit, and like the whole aftermath of that, he went from buying toys to buying water and food and shelter. So that was really I was never as close to that situation until this whole year happened, and it exposed the truth behind the curtain for me. It was. I probably say it was one of the hardest year for me. Like in terms of like seeing what was happening is just absolutely devastating that humanity would let this happen. It's just inconceivable to me that there's still people that are neglecting it or not talking about it, and it's like it's just I feel I am I really care and feel for the suffering of these innocent people that should not be. I think there's probably a concerted effort to make this happen. It's not a roundabout way of engaging in war. It's a direct strategy to harm civilians. Which, kind of fasting forward. At Geyser we're non-custodial, so there's no problem in us hosting these projects. But if you just look around the space and how law is being used kind of predatorily against Bitcoin companies, we kind of thought it was important at this point to actually pause on listing this project in Gaza, and actually not just in Gaza, but in projects that are in conflict areas. And the reason why conflict areas are so challenging for a crowdfunding platform is that, well, we never know. You never really fully 100% know where the funds are going, and they could be funding either sides. It could be funding war itself, really, which I'm sure this was not happening at all, because I have absolutely no reason to believe so. But what's important is that we wanted to take a decision to kind of not basically this is one of the situations where the protocol does the job, and there are also much more non-custodial solutions out there, and that's why we decided to stop projects that are based in these conflict zones that could put all the projects on Geyser at risk if Geyser were to shut down. So this is really, really unfortunate. It was a really hard decision, but what we are still bullish on is just the broader Bitcoin ecosystem and the existence of even more self-sovereign and non-custodial tools like BTC Pay Server that are now hosting the projects. So as hard as it was for us, I think it was an important decision. Also, kind of connected to our broader earlier point, which is why we built Geyser. Like, we built Geyser ultimately to make Bitcoin adoption happen faster, empowering Bitcoin projects, empowering Bitcoin tools, empowering Bitcoin educators, Bitcoin, film, Bitcoin culture more broadly. We just want Bitcoin to happen, and I think it was important for us to kind of redirect around that. Let's just make sure we power Bitcoin creators and stay absolutely on the clear, so that we can keep powering and serving creators that are making Bitcoin adoption happen, and get to the core of the problem of fiat, right? Get to the core of the problem of Bitcoin becoming a reality. That's really what we're built.
Yeah, and I think it's really sad that this stuff kind of happens, but I can sort of understand, because even though you're not taking custody, it can be used in a way. But I think you've done enough in terms of getting exposure to some of these fundraising projects. And the good thing about it is that people can do, with modern technology, yes, it's possible to fake things with AI, but it's also pretty easy and straightforward to verify things because you can talk to people directly and ask them to show you things in a way
And
that
I've
can't really
spoken
be
to
done in a
Yusuf. I've
picture-based AI.
spoken to him, and again, I'm very confident and him, doing good. I really am, which is why it's so heartbreaking and hard for us to have delisted the project. But ultimately, as you've seen with just things happening around the space, the powers that be will 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 use the law as a weapon against you, especially if you're a small company. So we just didn't want to take the risk anymore, honestly. And when there are tools out there that will still do the job, and will use we'll use the Bitcoin protocol at an even deeper level of censorship resistance. So again, we've taken the projects a long way. We're happy about what we've done, and we're really happy that someone else has taken kind of that, the project forward. And again, bullish. Thank you, Yusuf, for what you're doing and for what you're exposing, and for the you're saving civilians' lives. And thank you for the contributors. Thank you for the thousands of people that have contributed so much. And this is really why Bitcoin was built, right? It's not like a hodling technology. It's not about NGO. It's about the freedom and the power that it enables us, gives us, and the fact that it connects all of us, right? We don't need a third party to give us permission. Just like you don't need Geyser, really. You just need, you need Bitcoin and Bitcoin connects us and enables us to funnel funds to where they are needed.
This podcast is also brought to you by the Bitcoin Way, your professional Bitcoin IT team offering you personalized, secure, and comprehensive solutions for every step along your Bitcoin journey. The Bitcoin Way offer live concierge service to guide you with your Bitcoin cold storage, running your node, privacy best practices, inheritance planning, corporate strategy, and multi-sig solutions. They don't touch your coins, they guide you through the process of acquiring your coins and securing them. If you'd like to make your setup safer and more reliable, book a consult with them and see what they have to suggest. If you want to give someone the gift of Bitcoin, get them this professional service that will ensure they start off knowing exactly how to manage their coins and not lose them. Go to thebitcoinway.com and start Bitcoining more confidently. The Bitcoin Standard podcast is brought to you by thesafehouse.com, my independent publisher and bookshop, selling the best Bitcoin books in high-quality cloth hardcovers built to last for generations. Most books these days are pretty fiat. They're flimsy and they fall apart quickly, and I did not want that for my books, so I set up the Safe House especially to provide you with beautiful, long-lasting classic cloth hardcovers you can proudly pass down for generations. You can get copies of my 3 books, The Bitcoin Standard, The Fiat Standard, and Principles of Economics, and you can also get copies of Lynn Alden's Broken Money, Parker Lewis's Gradually Then Suddenly, and Matthew Lysiak's Fiat Food, to which I contributed a few chapters. We now offer bulk discounts so you can buy books for yourself and for the friends and family you'd like to learn about Bitcoin. Buy any 2 books for $50, any 5 books or more for $20 per book, and for more than 50 books, it's only $15 per book. Go to thesafehouse.com, the SAIF house.com, where you can get all of these books in high-quality cloth hardcovers, delivered worldwide, and get 10% off for paying with Bitcoin. Yeah, I mean, I think the project has taken on a life of its own, and because it's really powerful, because it's the only way to get money into Gaza. So if you're interested, go to bitcoinforpalestine.org.
Yeah.
Just Bitcoin for Palestine, one word. And on that website, you'll be able to donate directly to this project, and it's also on Twitter at BTC Palestine. You can find it there. That's the Twitter handle. And there are options to pay with Lightning. You can pay directly on chain on bitcoinforpalestine.org. On that domain, you'll go to the BTC Pay server page. So all of these are ways in which you can just get money in there, and there's no way of stopping them. And you can see daily updates from Yusuf, the guy who's handling this project. And I remember him. I spoke to him from before the war. He was working on that project you mentioned. He was collecting Bitcoin to get it to Gaza. And then when the war happened, he became the only way to get money in. So a lot of people like to say so many things about what's going on. A lot of people have very strong opinions about it. And it can be very frustrating to watch this much human suffering and find yourself unable to do anything about it. And unless you have Bitcoin, you just can't do anything about it. But at least with Bitcoin, you can. You can make a difference. You can get actual food into people's mouths, which otherwise wouldn't be there, because this money is helping create a market and create a supply for food in that place, which is incredibly powerful. So again, thank you for doing that. Really amazing.
Yeah, I mean, thank you to Yusuf and the creators really that are contributing to it, and they're really the heroes on the ground. We held a torch for a bit, and I'm happy it's kind of still going forward, and there's still light. And this is where we realize really, like, and I wonder what your thoughts are on this, but why Bitcoin exists in the first place. Like, so many Bitcoiners are caught up in the HODL narrative and like NGU and like so many. And then a situation like this comes out, and it's like, oh wow, this is why Bitcoin exists, right? And also, like it's much more than NGU and like hodling forever and diamond hands. It's let's use this Bitcoin to enable and grow Bitcoin, right? So I was reading this article by actually my co-founder about Bitcoin. The price of Bitcoin being kind of very tightly correlated to the adoption of Bitcoin. So like the addresses, the Bitcoin addresses that exist, and also the hash rate. So Bitcoin is not an exponential like we have often been taught. Like kind of the God candle and hyper Bitcoinization just coming all of a sudden. You wake up one day and it's just Bitcoin's $1 trillion. It's all correlated to usage and adoption, and how we enable adoption is through not hodling. As in, hodling is incredibly important. Like it teaches all of us how important it is to save, and how saving is the backbone of economies. Unlike the state wants us to believe that it's all about consumption, right? Like actually saving is how we grow an economy. But then how through saving is a means of investment and support and donations. And that's what we're focusing on at Geysers. Donations are the what we call the kind of the ground layer of financing. Actually, donations are kind of essentially financial layer number one, right? Like you're just donating with nothing in return, right? And then the layer two is actually buying. So you're donating exchange of something else, which is like a marketplace. And then layer three is you are donating, like you're giving money, expectation of return. So maybe it's like a loan with interest. And layer four is investing in a company where it's not just the interest you're getting back, but it's like the equity and the dividends and so forth, right? So that's sort of how we see it at Geyser, and we're trying to get people into let's not just hodl save, which is again really important, but just not enough. Like we have to use our Bitcoin to support Bitcoin creators out there, but also donate to important causes where other systems are not enabling transactions to happen. I don't know. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's true. I mean, I'm definitely a fan of hodling Bitcoin because I think, first of all, it's something that is essential for humans as a civilization. This is what makes us human beings. One of the quintessential things is our ability to think of the future and to plan long term. And money is the best mechanism for us to save into the future and to think of the long term. So the ability to have a money is a great thing. And it's something that over the last century, humans have had taken away from us. It's not been possible to just store money easily, which is what gold was. It's beautiful in its simplicity, in that you just grab this little shiny yellow metal and you lock it up over time, and you've magically teleported economic value into the
Hmm.
future, and it's grown a little bit. So if you hold a little bit of gold for 10 years, you spend it 10 years later, you're likely to have more purchasing power than you did, because the things that you want to buy have increased in supply, likely more than gold has increased in supply. So you are rewarded in a sense for being able to delay gratification. And this is good for you as an individual, but it's also good for society in that you're not consuming. So the fact that you're not consuming means the resources that would have gone toward producing your consumption goods will instead go toward producing production goods. It's capital. It's either because you're going to use that money to buy capital goods with it, or because the capital goods become more cheaply available because you're consuming less. So it's something that's great for you as an individual and is necessary. And over the last century, we've lost the ability to do that. Instead, you have to invest your money if you're going to beat inflation. And this is something that is marketed as if it is something that is easy. But if you really think of
Yeah.
inflation in a practical sense, and in the way that it's done, they don't calculate housing prices in inflation, since nobody needs to buy a house, because you will own nothing and you will be happy. They think of the house as being part of your saving account. So essentially, your house is the financial asset, and you are homeless effectively because you're just living in the bank's financial asset, where you're a joint partner in a venture with a bank, which can kick you out. So you don't really own the house, but you've got equity in the house as a substitute for savings. Now, it's obviously preferable for me, and I think a lot
Hmm.
of people would prefer to just have their savings as something that is not um, so risky as a joint venture with with the bank to leverage the housing market. So you'd have your house as a consumption good, and you'd
Hmm.
save in a decent money. So people
Hmm.
today don't really have a sense of why saving is not just nice because it makes you have money in the future. Uh, it's also necessary for us to be able to think of the future, and the fact that
Hmm.
it gets transformed from something that is just very simple, where you just buy this yellow shiny metal and then it helps you transport value to the future, teleport value into the future. And now you need to go and understand monetary policy, and understand housing markets, and understand stocks and bonds
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
commodities and foreign central banks and wars and all kinds of crazy things,
Yeah.
just in order to keep the wealth that you've gained. That is, I believe, a major factor for a lot of the problems we see around us, and that people become a lot more short termist and their time preference is higher. And so they're less capable of thinking of the long term. So I say, hodling is great, but of course, ultimately, the point of money is to spend it. The point of
Yeah.
money is you hold it and then you spend it, and it's a medium of exchange. It's something that is not acquired for its own sake. It's something that is acquired to be exchanged for something else. And it could be that something else is a house that you're saving for in 10 years from now, or it could be or a consumption good that you want, or it could be something that you might need today. But the good thing about it is that it allows that optionality. That's what money is. Money is having the ability to use economic value, economic purchasing power to meet your needs at any time you want it. It's that optionality, the idea that you're not restricted or restrained by some force that controls what you're able to do with this. It's just something that you can spend, and
Hmm.
that, of course, becomes harder and harder in the fiat system, because all your forms of wealth can't really be in liquid form, because liquid money is terrible. It's a melting ice cube, as Michael Saylor calls it. So you can't put it in a melting ice cube. So you have it stuck in all kinds of ventures and illiquid things like a
Hmm.
house. And so you can't just sell 5% of a house to meet an emergency. It's not easy. It's not simple. It's more complicated. And so
Hmm.
the beauty and the optionality of money is that you can use it whenever you want to. and some of that might be now. And I think, um, you know, for fundraising and for crowdfunding, this is usually something that you can see um, enormous value from, that would be worth spending the money on. Because yeah, you could keep it for a long time, but you could also see a value today because you're able to do things with Bitcoin that you cannot do otherwise. And I think that's pretty important.
Yeah, yeah, and I definitely agree. The value of hodling and saving, it changes, like it rewires your brain, and in a helpful way, that to appreciate the future more than the present, and think into the long term, and have families and all that wonderful stuff. But I do want to point out an example to kind of bring my points a little bit closer, of someone. So there's someone right now in Geyser who's launching Maya, who's launching her campaign for presidency in Suriname, right? So she's running for president, and she's she's a Bitcoiner, right? She's a Bitcoiner running for president in Suriname, and she just today received, or was it yesterday, half a Bitcoin to help fund her campaign. So I'm not sure. I think it was Bitcoin. I'm not sure exactly who this was, but it was probably an OG Bitcoiner who did what you said, right? He hodled his Bitcoin for probably a long time. I don't know. And then he's given this as a gift to do what? To enable Bitcoin to happen, right? So we should all definitely stack sats and hodl and all of that. But ultimately, what makes a Bitcoin option happen is Bitcoiners taking action. Bitcoiners like you that have written an incredible book and influenced millions of people. Bitcoiners like Maya, who's running for president and is going to be in some shape or form influencing people there, and getting people to think about Bitcoin seriously. It's other Bitcoiners like Mi Primer Bitcoin, who are educating tens of thousands of people around the world about Bitcoin, students and so forth. And so, because ultimately what brings Bitcoin up is the rate of adoption and the rate of hash rate. It's like, that's like, the numbers don't lie. And the power law of Bitcoin is an important concept to understand, that, yeah, we can assume that in 10 years, Bitcoin will be up and gold will be up, and like, your Bitcoin will be worth more. But it's only based on the assumption that people are going to be doing work for it. And that means doing a podcast, that means doing writing a book about it, that means running for president, like whatever you think will add value. It's both that kind of the adding value, being the creator that makes Bitcoin, reality, and also being one who funds these early ventures and through a donation or whatever means. But if we don't have these Bitcoiners that are spending the half a Bitcoin towards these creators and invest in these ideas, then we're all just gonna be stuck with this Bitcoin on our hands, and no one's gonna be doing anything about it. So I agree, hodling is super important, but I think we need to recognize more and more the importance of supporting the ecosystem, and enabling people with great ideas to get out there and do these things.
Yeah, and of course, the thing is, ultimately, I think people who stay in Bitcoin for a while end up regretting not spending some of their Bitcoin at some point,
Interesting.
because there are points at which the price of Bitcoin goes up significantly, and you've got money that can change your life, and then you end up with a situation that you don't sell because you're hodling, but then
Right.
the price crashes and you no longer have that option of having that money to change your life. So I guess it's a good reminder that ultimately, yes, Bitcoin is a great thing to hodl, but you can't, well, I mean, you can, obviously nobody's stopping you, but time preference is never zero. There's no such a thing as zero time preference. So at some point you need to live life, you need to experience it. You're only going to be young once, you're only going to have the opportunity to have children for a certain part of your life. And so you prioritize earlier experiences, you prioritize earlier income, but at the and no matter how low your time preference is, you want to save up for something. You need that money for something. It's good to have, obviously, money for emergencies. It's good to have money for the future.
Yeah.
But it's also good to live in a nice house. It's also good to eat good food. It's also good to help use your money to help make the world a better place in all the
Yeah,
ways in which you
yeah,
want. You
yeah.
invest capital, and so yeah, I mean, I think it's you probably shouldn't be timing the market in the sense of going and trying to predict what the market is doing, and you're doing margin trading. But there is a case to be made that you should think about it, maybe not in terms of trying to time the market, but in terms of trying to time your own expenditures and your own needs in life. And so once you find that you have
Mm.
you're at a situation where you've got this much money, then you should have a plan for when my Bitcoin stash is this big, then that's the time for me to maybe donate this money to charity, or maybe buy a
Right.
car, or maybe buy a house. And yeah, I think it's if you have this as a way of thinking, there's a case to be made that this will ultimately be better off, because say you can buy the car or buy the house, and your life is improved because you've got a better house or a better car, and then it turns out you end up not regretting the decision, because the alternative is the Bitcoin would have crashed 70, 80, 90% after that, and you still got a house and the house still works. Yeah, you've got fewer sats, but you maybe you have sats left. You can still stack
Mhm.
more. So there are definitely ways of taking the Hodl meme a little too seriously, and
Yeah,
ending up becoming Uncle Scrooge.
I,
So
I agree, and I think yeah, I think as you said, I actually have heard this before from several people that they've regretted not spending their Bitcoin, and I think it also has to do with our time being more scarce than Bitcoin, right? Like the only thing that's more scarce than Bitcoin is our own lifetime. Like our own experiences are scarce. Like this time spent doing this podcast is us, me not spending time with family, or it's like what
yeah,
do we decide to be spending time on is probably the most important thing ever. And if Bitcoin is money and money is time, and with more money we have more time, then wouldn't we want to be using that time, extra time that we have? I think so. And I think that's at a personal sort of kind of egocentric level. But then if you extend that outward into the community, and if you think about, well, if this reduces by a year the amount of Bitcoin adoption, uh, the speed of Bitcoin adoption, then isn't it me worth donating towards this film, for example, that will orange pill hundreds of thousands of people, right? And I think that similar time frame of time, that it'll actually spending believing in Bitcoin creators that are making the books and the podcasts and the films will reduce the time to adoption of Bitcoin, if you see what I mean. And maybe we're super, like, super long term time preference, but if we want to see Bitcoin happen tomorrow, like yesterday, then then there are so many great ways to do that. Like the other example I wanted to point out, which you were a key part of, is the Orange Pill app project on Geyser to orange pill or politicians in Congress, right? So was it Matteo from Orange Pill app said, if Saifedean joins Orange Pill app, I'm going to donate 450 books to all members of Congress in the United States, right? Like, and guess what? You joined the app, and they were like, oh shit, what are we gonna do here? So we connected, and they launched a project on Geyser, and guess what? Like he's was able to actually, I think, entirely crowdfund the entire campaign. I think we have over $8,000 donated from hundreds of Bitcoiners all around the world to crowdfund the buying of the Bitcoin Standard that would go to every single Congress member in the United States. And guess what? Uh, Thomas Massey read the Bitcoin Standard and was orange pilled. Like, how can you put a value in terms of like the rate of adoption that this can have on Bitcoin, right? Like, we may be talking about months, maybe years, like, I don't know, right? But it has an impact, and it's about time preference in terms of how soon do we want to make Bitcoin adoption happen. And and I think it's through this, it's through action, it's through kinetic energy of it's not just Bitcoin itself, and hodling is potential energy, but then we need to. That's what we call it a geyser, because a geyser is literally kinetic energy being ejected up into the atmosphere, and it's about taking that potential energy and transferring to kinetic, and making the rate of adoption faster, and enabling Bitcoiners to take action with great ideas and making Bitcoin happen. Because as we've discussed so much throughout the show, like the sooner we get to Bitcoin, the sooner we get to hope, the sooner we get to prosperity, the sooner we get to wealth, and the less the further we get from misery, fear, like mutually assured destruction, right? So yeah, so that's why it's so important to hodl, and it's also so important to let the sats flow, as we say. Just like, let's support great initiatives that are doing good, that are raising humanity forward, that are bringing hope to the world, and let's do that. Let's make that happen sooner.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. What about Noster? What are you guys doing with Noster? Tell us more about that.
Good question. So yeah, so Geyser is sort of interoperable with Noster to some degree. We're not entirely Nostrified, but you can zap projects from Noster. We are you can log in with Noster, and actually every project on Geyser is also on Noster, like in an interoperable way. So every project on Geyser has its own npub that you can actually go look at on Noster itself. So that's really like the step one of our integration with Noster. In the future, we do plan to do more, a deeper integration where you can just use your own npub and not us having to create one. But this is our first step to kind of basically sync up with the Noster reality. But since Noster is still somewhat small, we're not entirely prioritizing that at the moment, just because we have bigger fish to fry in terms of just trying to get to profitability, get to just things that we can build that can bring the retention up on Geyser, the virtuous cycle up on Geyser. There's a lot of stuff that we're building coming up soon that really excites me, and it's going to be really, really interesting. We talked about creators being heroes, so we're going to be releasing some interesting kind of features about that, and trying to reward people that are enabling these projects to get funded. So you can either create a project on Geyser, and you're a creator and you're a hero for doing that. You can also contribute on Geyser, and you're making these projects happen. That also makes you a hero. Or you can share projects and enable contributions to happen, in which case you're basically like a messenger, and you're also a hero, and we can sort of recognize and reward you for it, non-monetarily, but kind of reward you, for enabling transactions to have happened. So, for example, if I share a podcast, so guys, if I share the Orange Pill project on Twitter, and people fund through that link, I can essentially, and if I enable 1 million sats of transactions, then I can be recognized as a hero, as a messenger hero. And so this is the kind of stuff that you can do with Bitcoin that is really mind-boggling, can't really do that with fiat very easily. So yeah, so really excited about what we're building at Geyser. Really, really hopeful and really positive that Bitcoin is a good force for the world, and we want to, we're just on this mission to make the Bitcoin economy kind of come to life. We're kickstarting the Bitcoin economy, I think, the way that we see it, and it's through a crowdfunding platform like Geyser.
Excellent. All right. Well, do you have anything else to tell us about your future projects other than this?
Yeah, look, I think we've talked at length. We've talked about all sorts of interesting things. Talked about Youssef, talked about kind of crowdfunding and the importance of contributing. So yeah, if you've got any ideas of ways in which you can contribute to Bitcoin, I'd just kind of urge people to yes, hodl, but also like contribute to Bitcoin, become a part of it. There's nothing better than becoming part of this revolution that we're witnessing, this special moment in time. And so anyone can do that. If you're an educator, if you're a community builder, if you're a developer, if you're if you've just got a film idea or a comic book, like Geyser can be the place where you can kickstart that idea and get the communities to support you and to eventually make it happen. We are constantly learning. We're growing with the Bitcoin community. So also very open to receiving feedback and seeing how we can keep on improving. But ultimately, this is why we're here, and to make Bitcoin happen.
Excellent. So the website is geyser.fund, GEYSER.fund.
Yeah.
And you are MetaMick14 on Twitter,
Yes,
right?
that's right. Yep.
All right. Well, Mick, thank you so much for joining us, and thanks for your time, and thanks for everything that you're doing, and hope everything works out.
Thank you so much, man. I appreciate it, and it's a true honor. Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks, man.
Cheers.